How many of you seen that before? Like originally in the 70s? One guy at the back. When we said that in Glasgow, almost everybody put their hand up. And it was very interesting seeing it with a different... How many Scottish people are here? Put your hands up. Oh, wow, that's really good. That's almost over half, actually. Oh, good. I won't say what I was about to say then. It was when... I mean, we've been through this before, haven't we, Murray? We showed this in Glasgow in March. And that,
Glasgow Film Festival.
The Glasgow Film Festival, and that was a big audience, and it went down amazingly well. And it feels a bit strange coming back to it, I've been living with. I mean, Murray's been living with this film for a long time, but I've been living with that print for 5 years, and the last year and a half I've watched it about 1,000 times, and so the last 3 months I never watched it. And then it's nice to see it again after 3 months and actually laugh because the jokes seem a bit more fresher. But I want to start by asking Bill. I'll come to you, Murray, don't worry. I'll Bill a question. This is Billy Connolly. I mean, this is right after, as they mentioned in the film, it's right after he was on the Paterson show. But you started with Billy, on the stage acting is it the Great Northern Welly
Boot Show? Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm apologising first because I'm Zelig like here. I just was happy to be in a particular crunch at this, and once that was over, what happened in the film there takes much more importance. But you'll have picked up at the very end of his Belfast gig, Billy sang the Welly Boot Show, the Welly song. It was for your Wellies. And that came out of a show that developed in 1972. Billy was quite a name, of course, with the Humble Bums and touring, and now and again doing some comedy in between the songs, but basically still the folk singer and on the road a bit. And in 1971, there was the UCS work-in at the shipyards in the Upper Clyde shipbuilding. There was a takeover, a work-in that became almost internationally famous. And in 1972, a very odd event happened in Glasgow called the Clyde Fair International. And they suggested a show that was like a parody of the Upper Clyde shipbuilders work-in, set in a Welly boot factory that was going to be shut down. And Billy wrote it with Tom Buchan, and we did it. Did it in Glasgow. It wasn't a great success, but a great man called Kenny Ireland, a mutual friend, sadly gone. Kenny said we should take this to Edinburgh for the festival, and so we formed a cooperative called the Offshore Theatre Company. Took it to Edinburgh, and the only venue left was the biggest in the city at the time, which was the old Waverley Market, right next to the station. It's now a kind of messy shopping centre, but in those days it was just a market with a glass roof. And we hired scaffolding, and it was the hit show of the festival. It cut it shortly, largely because of Billy Connolly. But we were all the actors around him, and at the very last night of the show, we had to get the scaffolding back to the scaffold company. They wanted another week's rent if it had stayed up for another couple of hours past midnight. So they said, well, we'll start the show early, 7 o'clock instead of 8. And nobody realised then, of course, that in Edinburgh in early September, it's still daylight at 7 o'clock in the evening. So there was no light effects. It was just nothing could happen. So Billy said, well, don't worry. He said, I'll go on. I'll talk to them till it gets dark. So he walked on with his guitar and the banjo, nothing much else. The band was down the front, but they didn't play. And he talked to that audience for 1 hour. And he'd never done that before. He'd never been entirely alone on the stage without anybody else around him. And he picked up the thing now and again, but basically he held that audience for 1 hour. And we all stood in the wings. It was like Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. It was like, A Star is Born. It's like seeing alchemy in front of your eyes. And it just brought the house down. 800 people felt they'd had a night out. And then, unfortunately, they had to watch the show afterwards. Where Billy played a straight man, the rest of us were funny. But that was it. That's where we learned, and Billy Connolly learned, nobody can follow and top Billy Connolly. And that was the beginning of it.
It's such an interesting progress. Starting out, I mean, almost accidentally falling into. I mean, he wasn't a comedian, was he? Even in the film, he doesn't describe himself as a comedian. He describes himself as sort of an entertainer. Yeah. But then he developed eventually in the 80s to, spearhead alternative comedy. But did he actually go out? Did he ever talk about, like, I want to do comedy, I want to be a comedian? Or was it always just, I want to be an entertainer?
I don't think he ever really thought about that, did he?
Chick Murray was his...
Chick Murray, exactly. Fell off his there.
Yeah.
That was his hero, wasn't it, Chick?
He was. They were incredible, unusual. The Humble Bumps.
Yeah.
They followed a group called the Incredible String Band.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Billy loved them.
Yeah.
But when he joined Tam Harvey, they were extremely funny. They were great.
Yeah.
And then Jerry Rafferty.
Yeah.
The man that wrote Baker Street and lots of other stuff, joined them. Jerry was an even funnier. You don't mind if I go on here?
Go for it.
It was even funnier because Jerry was so romantic. Billy would be, wasn't it for your way?
And when we played it in Glasgow, people sung along to that in the audience. I was waiting, but nobody sang.
And Billy would go, anyway, thanks very much. I'll just leave it with Jerry. And Jerry would go, the call she was. Do these lovely romantic songs.
Yeah.
And all the girls in the front. It's very funny.
Yeah.
But didn't he once say, we're the humble ones?
Yeah.
I'm humble and this is my pal.
This is Tam the Bam. They were funny. They used to go to gigs in Glasgow and it's pouring wet, particularly folk clubs, and he had an old motorbike called an Aerial, something called, and Billy had no helmet, of course, in those days, and Tam, how Tam had that comb over here?
The ginger comb over.
Tam had he wore a crash helmet. He wore a helmet, he's in the back. Yeah. He said, just to cover his barnet, because it was flickering. And to be in a group and you've got a comb over it, but it was. Excuse me.
They can bleep that bit out.
Billy there.
So, Murray, moving on to Murray, one of the most important man in the room. Sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a Willie too, My first name is William.
I know, the two Willies. I used to, I remember going on the father, I used to say that with Billy.
You were establishing yourself as Scotland's greatest documentarian, that's the trademark, working with funds from the Films of Scotland Committee, you'd started making your documentaries about Macintosh is 68?
Yeah, that's right.
1968, and you'd been making films with Bill, because you'd made Kaleidoscope, is that right?
Yeah, well, there was I actually applied. The year before, the head of film department, David Hanley, was Cliff Hanley's brother. We said we should go and look at the Edinburgh Film Festival. And we went to see how they judged the films. And we found out they didn't judge them at all. Films just arrived. And they ticked boxes, good photography, nice script. And I thought, that's not the thing to do. And then there was an ad went up the next year saying, director for the Edinburgh Film Festival. And I applied for that. I couldn't understand why I was being asked what are my script writing skills, and I was actually joining Films of Scotland, so it was a trick. But I stayed there, and it was a kind of strange thing because this man Forsyth Hardy, who was Grierson's biographer, he was very crafty in trying to find money out of nothing. Because, as Grierson said, Films of Scotland was a quango. It was given a remit, but no remittance. So they always had to find money.
It was the Films of Scotland was a government department that handed out government money for filmmakers to make films promoting Scottish industry and culture.
No, there was no money involved.
Oh, there was no money.
So he had to find money, and they found out all the little thing called the Convention of Royal Boroughs was being wound up. A lot of little towns. In the place I live, Inverkeithing, it's actually older than Edinburgh. There were royal boroughs, and they're all being wound up, and there was money there, so he got some money. And filmmakers got a film to make at Kirkcaldy or Dundee or St Andrews. I decided to do the ones on the Parahandy province of the Lower Clyde, and it was a jolly. So Billy's great friend is John Byrne. John Byrne, and there's a very famous Glasgow story. The man who came up the Clyde on a bike. So we did animations of going past Paddy's Rock on the bike and animations and everything. And so we became a kind of picaresque film of going through all the boroughs, and Billy's actually in that. And he's extremely funny in that too.
Yeah, and if you want to see Kaleidoscope, it is a great little film. I know some of my colleagues here have seen it. It's actually on this Blu-ray, which is available now in the shop, and it will be available online to buy. Commercial break. The film itself will also be on the BFI player, but the extras will not. So it means you have to watch it on streaming and buy the disc. That's the end of the commercial break.
But we never thought because there was no film industry in Scotland, and commercials were one way you thought of trying to get onto. I think it was a bum steer, as you say, but Lynch, who was Billy's agent, is in the film, Frank Lynch. He called us to make a commercial about the Apollo, which is in Glasgow. And it was so boring an idea that we just declined it, my partner and me, Patrick Higson. And he walked out. And he actually did a double take and came back in. I said, because why don't we film Billy's going to go to Dublin and go up to Belfast, and the Troubles are on. Well, that would be an interesting film.
Was it part of a 12-week tour he was on? You done it?
No, that was just this was
separate.
Separate, yeah. So he said no, and he walked out the door, came back in. How much? And I said, well, we could do it for 10,000, which is crazy now, but it's possible to do it then. Even have a plane in the middle as well. So it was all that's all ad hoc, and we just didn't know what we're doing. I found out things ahead of the screen, so we just worked out a kind of way of scenario of meeting people in Dublin, and then of course he was definitely frightened going up to Belfast because people, storming the story. Yeah, and so that's when he said, "This man Connolly's a blasphemer" and all that.
Yeah. So you and David Peat, did you do a sort of? Did you go ahead slightly, maybe? Not days ahead, but maybe 10 minutes ahead.
No. We were 2 minutes ahead, probably.
2 minutes ahead.
But basically, we'd done a film with Roger Grafe, who was the person who worked out you could film very secret meetings, provided everything was very confidential. You didn't change the order of things, and you could observe them. And we were doing one for Hunterston. The nuclear power station was being scaled down. There was some danger in it, and they were going to lay off a lot of people. And then Monty Finniston, who was the head of it, a Glaswegian, was heading this meeting, and I was there. Patrick didn't come to this meeting, my partner, and David found out if someone asked a question and you didn't get it, he would ask that question if you came out the side of the room. So we were going on, and suddenly the phone rang, and Monty Finniston said, "No, there's no one of that name here." Grigor? Oh my God. There's a secret meeting, and he's calling me. "Where are you?" says Patrick. I said, just ring off. I was going to invite you for a beer. I said, "No, wait a minute." So that was a kind of calamity. I never told Roger that till about quite recently, and he thought it was very amusing. But
I'm a technician, so I've got a technical chat for you. So everyone can fall asleep if you want. But how many what was the setup? How many? It was 16mm. Because it feels so fresh and natural. How many cameras were there?
No, just David? There was 2 cameras, but Patrick was running the second camera. We didn't get much out of it because it was actually quite dangerous downstairs. We're taking guns off the audience on all kinds of spectrum of all this madness was going on in Belfast, and probably a good thing. And then we put together a rough edit, and it was running about 40 minutes or something. And I rang up Billy Cotton, and he sent up his sidekick for BBC, and they watched the film and said, "Well, cut it down to 30 minutes, take out all these dirty bits and all that political stuff, and you got a deal." And Paddy said, "We got a deal." I said, "Bloody hell, we've no deal. Let's put more dirty bits back in and make it 90 minutes."
Yeah.
So that's how, and that was worth working. That's worked out really well.
And how much was left over after the cut that we saw? How much more did you shoot? Was there hours and hours and hours?
Well,
days?
normally we'd be on the cutting room floor, but in our film, it was in the film.
Yeah. That's my favourite credit from any film is man on cutting room floor. So there were no men on the cutting room floor. They all made it into the film.
Yeah,
That's incredibly economical.
Yeah.
The ratio is...
Yeah, it was a pretty good ratio,
Yeah.
The trouble is, poor David, film stock wasn't so fast then, and when Billy appears in his black suit and against a black background, all he saw was his nose and his wellies.
I've told you this. When we were working, I did the colour grade on this, and it was very, very difficult because you're having to find that point in the, not in the colour, but in the brightness, basically. Because at points he would just be a floating head, because you chose to have a black leotard in front of a black curtain. And I think we managed it. It was very difficult, though, because, as you said, the stock back then, if you filmed it with modern stock, it would be a very, very different story.
Yeah.
But that was a real struggle.
But this man is incredible, because the film was actually bought by Brent Walker, and they were gangsters, really, and they made 35mm prints, went round the circuit of Britain. It was very well, house record was broken in Newcastle, apparently. But after the run, they burnt all the copies. Meanwhile, I had one single copy when I was working in the States, setting up a film, and I noticed in Santa Monica, where we're living, there was a little pub at 11th Street called it's called the Thistle Bar, the Fleur of Scotland, and it was coming up for November, the St Andrews night, November the 30th. So I went down to see if he would like to show the film there, because I had a copy with me, and it was raining, unlike California at that time, and there's a guy at the bar with his back turned to the bar, checking the bottles. And I said, it's a dreich day to show that I was from a land of porridge. And he didn't say no, didn't make any notice. I said again, I heard you. It'll be a dreich day when there's dust on the bottles. So I told him about Billy Connolly. No interest. The man's a disaster. He sells us out. A horrible man, bad mouth and everything. A wee guy came up to me and said, you know, I would love to see that film. And my friend Big Tam is coming round, and sure enough, Big Tam arrived. And I said, you're a big Billy Connolly fan? Absolutely, he said. I said, what do you do? He said, you know the Hello Dolly set at 20th Century Fox? I built it. Nobody can ding it doing. It's an incredible guy. Oh, wow. And we arranged a show there. And for some incredible way, they were still running like a Glasgow pub. So it smelled awful, jays and piss, and I mean, it was really horrible. And my wife came in, and she's put at the back, and they're all these very large ladies, and where did they come from? And they all seem to be Scottish, and they're all from Dunoon. They're all dump wives of American mariners, submariners. Terrible, poor people there. So anyway, in that line where they said don't do much sex, Barbara gets nudged from both sides by two fat ladies saying, well, that's true of all your countrymen.
But
I walked out with another film student, George Haggerty. I said, it's the most depressing day I've ever had in California. I said, with Murray, I said, but we've got the palm trees, the beautiful palm trees. Aye, but the palm rats in there. Oh. So it's a psychotic evening, really.
And you ended up leaving your print.
And then to make myself, we were going around doing work columns for Frank Lloyd Wright buildings around the country. And Linda Miles was running the Pacific Film Archive at the time, so I just gave my copy thinking they might be interested. I think they never saw it. But where David got very ill and was terminal, so I tried to get that copy out, and it been very difficult. But actually BBC Scotland managed to get it out, and we made a copy of it. And then every time we wanted it out, they wanted $200, so that's not going to work. And this genius put something on eBay. You tell that story.
Well, I got that one over there for 50 quid, and I got the other one out of the Pacific Film Archive for free. I've promised some stuff in return, so we don't talk about that. But
that was from the Falklands War, which is incredible.
Well, yeah. So I mean, in all seriousness, so the version, your copy that is in the University of California was the version that I guess you would call your answer print, because it was uncut. And the print that I've discovered was a release print. We also found it was released on VHS in the early days of VHS, so we had a reference copy of that, and we noticed that my print and the VHS's copies, masters, were censored. So it was censored on distribution. They'd cut out some chat about blasphemy and some chat about venereal disease. I mean, why would you want to cut that out? And also there was a section of audio where Connolly's talking about blasphemer and all that, and that was in a different part of the film.
It was on the plane.
That's right. Yeah. And on the distribution version, it didn't make much sense. They moved things about and they'd cut things, but thankfully on Murray's version it was complete. So we managed to reassemble using Murray's print and the print that I found, using all the best sections, and we used one of our labs, so I should give a shout out to Restore Studios, who scanned it to restore it, and then we also restored the audio from another source, from a video source that we found in our own archive, so it was a real proper bit of restoration.
Yeah, he's a nation's famous film ferret.
Yeah. A ferret, you know. Billy. Yeah, I mean, you were there.
Yeah.
I remember when we were in Glasgow. I mean, you were in the film. You're sort of darting about in the background, making sure everything's happening, everything's in the right place. Billy, you got to be down here. You got to do this. You got to do that. You were the chief wrangler of the banana feet, the banana boots, which you can see in a museum in Glasgow if you want to see them in the People's Palace.
I also left them
Yeah.
banana boots. We were coming down to a big gig, the Victoria in the Apollo in Victoria, and we stopped at Knaresborough service station, the last gas station before you come into London, Brent Cross. And Billy says, "Bill, get the banana boots, get them a wee dust, movie, check the gear, right? Check the banjo, did all that. I got them out, did that. Took the banana boots in a black bin bag, put them down, filled up, boom, right, aye, okay, boom. Drove off, boom, down to the gig, into the Apollo. 20 minutes before curtains up, Billy, aye, what? You get the banana boots, give him a wee dust. I just looked at him, you all right? I said, no, I'd left them at the gas station, Brent Cross. Oh, what a day. We'd never have gone on without them.
Well, yeah.
So,
I mean, they survived because they're in the museum.
Well, I got a motorbike courier and I had the receipt and I was trying to hide from Frank.
Okay.
Because Billy didn't want Frank there anyway. I better not say too much. They didn't get on very well. Billy once said, "Look at him, his dark slacks and his Pringles sweater and that stupid haircut." You know, then he turned around and Frank was there and he went, "Hello, Frank." You know, and Frank was a teetotaler and didn't smoke. So it was difficult trying to keep them separate. I don't know if you noticed that in the film.
Frank's he's mainly wearing the green V-neck sweater, and he's there saying, you know, you've got to meet the press, you've got to do this, you've got to do that.
But Billy was a hippie way back. I worked with Billy for 20 years.
Well, you go back to the shipyards, right?
Yeah, I first met Billy Connolly in John Brown's shipyard, and we got on famously. It was terrific. And I drove around the Humble Bums with an old beat-up van. It was an ex-post office van. It had one wiper and bald tyres, and I drove from Kirkcaldy to Glasgow with Billy Connolly, Tam Harvey, Jerry Rafferty and Barbara Dixon.
Big insurance.
I never got any money for petrol. I think Barbara gave me a cheque for £1.50. I don't know if you
That's very
know
generous.
No, but anyway.
She's not here, thank God.
The banana boots, I got them. The motorbike courier went up to the gas station and the banana boots were still in the black bin bag.
God.
But the last word on that, it was a dangerous situation when we came back from Belfast. I was hoping Brian Wilson and
I think he's in the audience here. The Minister of Transport. Can you stand
that's
up?
Right, yeah. I thought it was Harris Tweed or something. Anyway, we flew out there in the daylight and it was lovely, and we arrived on I remember a motorway, then a dual carriageway and straight into the gig. But on the way back, it was dark. And
This is Northern Ireland still.
In Belfast, thank you. And then on the way back, we were in this big limo. I think it was just me and Billy. So I said, "Where are we? Seem to take forever." "All right." And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." But there was no army. So suddenly there was a set of lights and there was digging the road up. Billy went, at this time, oh, it was scary, you know. We were sitting there and Billy went like that to me. He went down. You know, aye. And I was looking out the window. Where's the army? And I couldn't see anybody. So I sent to the driver, and he had a really strong Belfast. "Well, I thought they were not all night, not oh no." Billy said, "What's he saying?" I said, "I haven't got a clue." He said, "He probably can't understand you." Anyway, it was scary.
Yeah.
And
obviously I wasn't alive, but you can't underestimate how scary it was. And there's that famous section in the film Murray, that we've chatted about, Connolly's talked about it in interviews over the years, and people have known about it, and this is where you can actually see it, whereas the rose is thrown on the stage and he picks it up, and in the interviews where he's talked about it, over the last 20 years, he talks about how he try not to swear here, but he panics basically and picks up the rose and just decides, you know what, screw it, I'm going to make a really great joke here, and if it goes wrong, we're out of here. But if it goes, and he pretends it's an explosive.
But the sad thing was, he did that in the audience. If he was introduced, Billy Connolly on the stage, and a girl got up with this rose and a little pussy, and we didn't have a camera to shoot it, so it comes in from the side. But if we saw that, and then he did it, and then he went boom, and it relaxed the whole audience on all sides, because there were fanatics from every angle of that terrible trouble.
It was an absolute mix of both sides in the audience, right?
And there were guns taken off people, 25 apparently.
Yeah. But he knew that as soon as they laughed at that split second, he had them in the palm.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I don't think you could underestimate.
Can you imagine doing that?
No.
Everybody felt. We were playing in Dublin a lot in the 70s, 73, 74, 75. And the tension even in Dublin, politically, when we did shows that brought up any sectarian issues were so to step into it the way you guys did and the way Billy did was bravery.
Yeah, and it kind of sort of led the way for other people to come in and do it as well. I mean, one of the interesting things when we did the press screenings a few weeks ago, we did press screenings in Ireland, and the Irish press came back, and a lot of them were saying, "Oh, it was terribly embarrassing, the Irish press in the film asking all these terrible questions with their terrible nail hygiene,
It was. I had to point out.
I actually thought the questions were all right, but there was sort of a bad question, like, "Oh, what are you going to do next?" You're like, "Oh, that's a great question," but So we're going to have to wrap it, because there's actually when we've played this in Glasgow, Alison, who runs the GFT, ran on stage and says, "You've got to wrap it up. Viggo Mortensen's waiting outside." So I don't think he's waiting outside, but there are people who've got to come in and watch another film. But before we go, I'm just going to say one more time that you can buy this. Also, I've got to mention that Billy's got a new book out, and they asked me to mention that. You probably know about that, because that's quite well publicised.
Is that me?
No, Billy Connolly. But I think Billy should.
I've got a jotter. That's a good.
I also want to mention that there's also another film coming out on BFI with Bill Paterson in it, Hidden City.
Give that one a minute.
Hey!
That's the reason he's here. So you can buy that as well online and on the BFI player. And if you really enjoyed seeing the film this evening, you can see it again in an hour in NFT3, or you can go to another cinema and watch it again. Anyway, it's been a real privilege to be up here with three of Scotland's greatest sons. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Can I just throw one quick?
Very quickly.
Just want to throw one quick.
Very quickly.
Up in Glasgow, the first question, I said, "Anyone know any questions?" and answered to the mic, and the bloke went, "Aye, I've got a question." I went, "Yes, sir, up there. Billy Connolly, who did he support? Celtic or Rangers?"
Yeah.
And they were to keep that quiet.
Yeah.
He said Partick Thistle.
Partick Thistle.
Thistle.
To keep that quiet, because I said, well, him and Rod Stewart are avid fans, they did become pals through Celtic, of course.
Anyway,
thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.